'twas a dark and stormy night, nor'easter rolling in. It's a long 12 hours, the power's out again. I pray for inner strength and that we don't lose no lives. Just another day in the first responders' eyes. Half a cup of coffee's gone, the first run comes in. A car slid off the road, there's a family trapped within. My heart beats like a hammer, I can barely catch my breath. I'm thinking the worst and hoping for the best. Yeah, we ain't superheroes, we're just ordinary people trying to make a difference, and the first on every scene. It's a heavy, heavy burden to carry all this burden when you can't unsee the things you've seen. It keeps going on when those sirens are gone.
Hey, welcome to the award-winning Mad Radio Show with Sam and John. We are bringing to you resources and better awareness programs for our first responders. This is the First Responder Network. We need you to share this out with everybody that you know, because the information that we provide is crucial to the mental health needs of our first-line heroes. Hey, Sam, how are you?
Doing fantastic. Welcome back after another Wednesday off.
Yeah,
you are
taking all this time off.
Crazy things. So what's that?
I said I'm taking all this time off.
Hey man, you deserve it, and the the story that you will eventually be able to tell is going to knock people into next week, because they are not going to believe everything that you went through. I mean, we got the story from Chateau, but what's been continuing, and the biggest piece that's going to come out of this is our work with the Badge of Honor. It's just going to make it hit home with so many first responders out there. And, things are not getting easier. They're getting rougher. And
as of today.
We've been talking about this since last year. We had another suicide while on duty in New York in the courthouse, and
another one in Chicago too.
Yep. And it's really, I'm writing the article this month. You're on deck for next month for the Police Blues magazine. So that'll be coming out mid-month in March. Look for that. But one of the things in the article, I'm doing some research, is that for first responders, it's no longer the trauma that's out there. Like, we all know that the traumatic incidents that we're going to be exposed to are out there. What is going on now is the constant barrage of negativity, of violence, of social media being thrown at our first responder community. And they're saying that is actually, and I say the professionals are saying that is what is now taking the biggest toll on the first responders. It's like, hey, we can deal with the 133 car pileup in Texas, but every day when we wake up and it's first responders this and another suicide there, and it just is, it's like we can't win walking around with targets on our back. We continue to be magnets for violence. And it really is a very scary time. And that leads us right into talking about our guests. Do you want to talk about our guests now?
Let me just reiterate what you were saying. I was looking at some of the statistics today. We've had 45 police, and we're just getting into March. So we're only really 2 months into the 2021. We've had 45 police shootings, 45 police officers shot. 11 have already died from their gunshot wounds, and 29 have already taken their lives by suicide, by their own hands. And that's 29 that have been reported. And you know as well as I do, some departments are a little shy on reporting officer suicide. So those numbers could be a little higher than 29. But when you look at the complexity of that's 10 a month.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, actually more. It's 15 a month nationwide that we're losing because of improper training on mental health. Officers out on the street are not being offered or given the resources, the proper resources, or the proper tools they need to get more mentally healthy. And I hope with our show, I hope with Monica who's coming on, she could help provide some of those resources and explain how certain treatment options are out there for our first responders.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the comment stream is open, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube. Go ahead and you can post a comment, ask a question, and we will make sure to see it. I can see it in the chat roll.
Okay.
So let's bring Monica on.
All right.
And so Monica Urbaniak is a consultant, trainer, and clinician specializing in trauma and sexual assault for nearly 2 decades, and she does not look like she's been doing this for this long.
I know.
It's a filter.
Yeah. And Monica, I got to get that filter. Monica works with survivors of trauma, helping them heal through therapy and support. She also provides training and consultation to clinicians, organizations, and community groups towards ensuring that services are client-centered and trauma-informed. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and board-approved supervisor, and she has received numerous, this woman has been recognized all over, local, state, and national awards for her leadership and service to the community. And we are so blessed to have her right here,
Yes.
Serving the Dallas city community and beyond. Monica, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you guys so much, Sam and John. I am just so honored to share this space with you and to be with you guys. And just, I'm so appreciative of all the wonderful work you're doing to ensure that our first responders are getting the support and service that they deserve, that they need for all they do for our community. So thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate y'all.
Oh, you're so welcome. Monica, I'm just going to jump in and start by, you do first responders, you see first responders on a daily basis. Me and Sam aren't in the office. We don't really get to hear some of the stories that are out there. But is it the need for better mental health treatment for our first responders? Do you hear that? Do you hear that from a lot of the guys and girls that come into your office going, "Hey, I never knew about these treatments. I never was afforded these opportunities"?
100%. I think you and Sam hit the nail on the head when you guys were talking in the intro that the trauma that first responders are experiencing is coming from a lot of different directions. And we're also in a very stressful time period in the world in general. We're dealing with multiple stressors, but we have that job stress, we have family stress, we have that community stress. It was what you were saying, John, about is it increasing? It made me think of when we first kind of identified PTSD as an issue. I'm thinking about the World War II vets that came back. They had ticker tape parades. And then we had our Vietnam vets come back who were also war fighters, and they were met with a lot of community resistance and disregard. And that's, I think, something that law enforcement is facing in a different way now than it has in the past. And I think that complicates the traumatic experiences that law enforcement officers are already confronting on a daily basis.
Yeah, you see a lot of law enforcement now walking away from the job that they love so much. A lot of guys take the job because they want to make a difference. It's been in there. They've wanted to do it since they were children. They grew up either generational or it was in their blood. And now they're actually being forced to leave the job because of certain political aspects, community aspects, and they just can't properly do their job without, some sort of backlash.
So the stress of that, coupled with what you mentioned, Sam, earlier, already the trauma that you see every day just creates what we call in the mental health world complex trauma. It's not a simple single incident trauma. You guys are experiencing trauma in a lot of different ways from a lot of different directions, and you don't have a lot of space to get relief from that. And as you mentioned earlier, John, we also, as a community and in law enforcement communities or in first responder communities, there hasn't been a lot of attention paid to how do we increase officer resilience? What do we do for these folks that are out there putting their lives on the line, supporting people in crisis, dealing with complex trauma every day to keep them healthy and well? That's just not something that we've really invested a lot of time and money and resources into in the past. And so, yeah, I think we're seeing the impact of that in officer and first responder wellness. And what you mentioned earlier, the tragedy that we're experiencing when first responders are losing their lives as a result of the trauma that they've been exposed to in the line of work that they've chosen to and they love deeply.
Yeah. Now, as an expert, you are brought in. You have been brought in multiple times, different departments for crisis intervention training. So again, here we are. We're after the fact.
Right.
So we're after the trauma. We're after the crisis. You as first responders, those of us that have sought help, it was after, and what you and a lot of folks in the space, including John and I and our other partners with the Badge of Honor, we're trying to say is before the trauma, as in, let's get you while you're in the academy. And then for obviously when we get to the academy, what happens? Well, great, you're in the academy. What about my other guys? And by guys, department, guys and gals. It has to be do you agree it has to be like a continuum of care?
Absolutely. Comprehensive. Absolutely. From recruitment, even if we look at it from that very beginning, recruitment and onboarding, what are the things that we're going to be exposed to and how are we going to provide you support around that, all the way to beyond retirement, because law enforcement officers and first responders don't stop being that person once they retire. And we also see a lot of the impact of trauma at the end of their careers because they have lost purpose in some ways. So yeah, this is full spectrum of care and it needs to be at every level. It's also not just for the guys on the street. It's also for the leadership too, because everyone is being impacted by the exposure to these traumatic events. If you're a leader and you're dealing with traumatized persons, you also have to know how to do that. But to your point, Sam, absolutely, increasing officer resilience prior to is going to make a huge difference in communities, huge difference in departments.
Let me ask you, in some of your cases, we talk about compassion fatigue a lot.
Sure.
Do you see a lot? I mean, back when me and Sam were on a job, we didn't have the news media. We didn't have everything up front and personal so much. Now we're getting a lot of families that are going, holy crap, you did that out on the street, or that's what's happening to you. Right. Do you see a lot more stress in the wives and husbands of law enforcement officers and the children as well?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. We have a lot more exposure to information now. And so, yeah, people can see what law enforcement officers and first responders are dealing with. And we know the trickle down effect of that. Families, children. I know you guys have talked before about the impact of being exposed to trauma and vicarious trauma all the time, how that impacts the first responder, but that has an effect on the way they parent, the way they partner, what kind of coping tools they choose to engage in, which I know y'all have been pretty good about talking about, the unhealthy ways that sometimes we cope when we don't have other options or know that we have other options. So yeah, compassion fatigue on the part of the first responders as well as their family members, their children, dealing with a partner who is undergoing traumatic experiences is really traumatizing in and of itself. And we call it compassion fatigue. We also have vicarious trauma. We have trauma exposure response. We have lots of words to really explain trauma. You're being exposed to trauma and you're getting impacted by it. That's all it is.
Right.
Now, a lot of departments, me and Sam have also talked about the current EAP programs that are in place. Yep. Do you see a lot of officers coming to you going, hey, I just don't trust that EAP program, or they're just not, they're not, because they go from one therapist to another, and it's repetition, and it really gets them nowhere. Do you see a lot of people losing faith in the EAPs?
I feel like it's really important for people who are in these lines of work to have a space where they can be ensured confidentiality. And why, while lots of EAPs, the therapist should be maintaining confidentiality, it's sometimes hard for first responders and law enforcement officers to feel very confident about that. And you also get a limited number of sessions most of the time. And so, I may get 5 or 6 sessions, but I'm a law enforcement officer. I'm trained to not necessarily trust everyone that I sit in a chair in front of, and I'm not really trained to talk about how I feel about things. So that may take some time to bridge that gap. And different therapists have different styles. I may not jive with someone who wants to be super touchy-feely with me, or I may need someone who's going to slow me down and help me to really sit with some feelings and gain some awareness so that I can unpack that. Everyone is different, and sometimes with EAPs, you're limited. But it's a tool, and I hope people take advantage of it as they can.
Right.
Right, and let's talk about let's get into the tools, because you wouldn't necessarily treat, when we're talking about vicarious trauma. Here comes my crazy zoo from their evening walk here. You wouldn't exactly treat with the vicarious trauma, whether it's a spouse or a child, as you would work the same with the first responder. And you are trained in EMDR, and you have your international certification through the EMDRIA. And EMDR has gained popularity. You had mentioned the Vietnam vets. I was very fortunate to find a social worker, licensed social worker, clinical social worker, and she was not a first responder. Mm-hmm. But from the minute I walked in her office, she put me at ease. And the one thing that I connected with her is that she had so much experience dealing with the Vietnam veteran community in specifically EMDR work with them. Wow. And having every guy in my family serve our country, that was the connection for me. I just was like, I'm so broken right now. Just for God's sake, I'm sitting here, just fix me,
Right, yeah.
I was so desperate at that point. Fortunate that it worked out very well. And John, is that your zoo?
That's my 5 dogs.
Okay, at least mine were quiet, and now he's sitting on the couch.
Tara must be coming home because the dogs are going nuts.
So this is what we love about doing the show on StreamYard, because
I love it.
You can be at home, relax, and you never know what you're going to get.
I'm going to call those y'all's therapy animals. Well, that's what we'll call them.
Exactly, yes. Exactly. The therapy animals wholeheartedly agree with the topic that we are discussing right now, which is EMDR.
Yes.
So you, again, let's backtrack. You are internationally certified in EMDR, amongst other methodologies that you practice. Talk about the advantages for first responders to receive EMDR, but I also want to go into some of the disadvantages.
Sure, absolutely.
Let's start with the advantages.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So EMDR, I know that you guys have talked about this before. So EMDR is a treatment tool. It's like any other treatment tool. It is a therapy that licensed professionals utilize to treat whatever thing that we're dealing with. And EMDR is one that has been highly researched and has been used for a really long time and is considered one of the most widely accepted trauma treatment tools. It's expanded over the last 25 years to we treat a lot of other things with EMDR as well, but it's really, really good for a lot of people with trauma. And one of the things that I really like about EMDR is it's very friendly to the person who's receiving it, to the client, as well as the clinician, because just like y'all as first responders and law enforcement officers being exposed to that trauma every day, therapists also get vicarious traumatization from being exposed to the trauma of our clients every day. And so EMDR is a tool that really helps kind of buffer that. So clients are feeling less re-traumatized, and clinicians are not getting traumatized as well. So that's really helpful in one of those ways. It also doesn't require some of the sitting down and talking about and emoting and feeling, and again, depending on the clinician who is employing the methodology, that you might get from traditional talk therapy. You know, I don't do a lot of, especially when I'm doing EMDR, like, how do you feel about that? And for a lot of people who are in certain lines of work, that's not their favorite thing to hear from someone. Tell me how you feel about that. And so EMDR facilitates a different type of treatment. Also, EMDR is very expeditious for people that have engaged in it. It's very expeditious, so they're not maybe spending as much time in therapy. People are busy, and it's hard to take time out of your day, and it's expensive to go to therapy sometimes. And so that's another advantage, that it's pretty expeditious, and we see the results from research are long lasting. If you do the comprehensive care, it's pretty long lasting. So those are some of the huge advantages that I see out of it. And it's easily applied. We can do it over Zoom. You don't have to be in the room to have it. You don't need any special equipment to do it. So those are all kind of some of the accessibility things that I feel like help with getting an effective treatment methodology to people who need it.
You know, you hit on a great point with the sitting on the couch. A lot of people, a lot of first responders aren't into the whole let's sit and discuss our feelings type of thing.
Sure.
Or they're impatient and they feel that, all right, like Sam said, just hurry up and fix me, right?
Yes.
I'm broken. Just hurry up and fix me. We got to let people know that it's time. It takes time.
Yes.
And not to give up. And what happens is, and I've seen it with some of the first responders, is they are partnered with maybe the wrong therapist.
Sure.
1, 2, and 3 different times. And then they just say, they throw their hands up and they give up. They're like, this is not working for me, because other resources like EMDR or brain spotting weren't offered in those sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. And EMDR is a comprehensive treatment modality too. I think when we think of EMDR, we think of the follow my fingers, that piece, but that's only one phase of the treatment. Like any other good therapy, there should be clinical rapport. You should get along with the therapist. You should have some kind of mutual respect and be working towards the same goals. You should have some goals. That would be cool too. You should be learning some coping skills and some resource building and some resilience development, so that, you know, you're only in the therapist's office 1 day a week, 1 hour a week, maybe, a lot of the times from the traditional methods, if you're not doing intensives. And so that's a lot of hours you're not in that therapist's office, that you need to have some tools so that you can maintain yourself and continue to function. I was talking with a law enforcement friend this weekend, and we were talking about how when you are, the traumatized brain loses its ability to think abstractly, think creatively, and to solve complex problems. I don't know about you, but I think that that's what law enforcement officers have to do all the time. And so EMDR helps to reduce that symptomology pretty quickly, so that we get that part of the brain that does the thinking, hopefully back online pretty quickly, so that people can do their job effectively. And a good therapist can help with some of that grounding. Well,
like Sam, when you did EMDR, you didn't walk into your therapy session, all of a sudden said, boom, we're going to hit you with EMDR, right? You had to feel like, go through a couple of sessions, build up that rapport, and start to find out and feel that safe zone, that comfortable feeling. Yeah. And they have to know you as well, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I shared this before, because I'll never forget. I mean, I wrote about it in my book, that I knew I was in a safe space because here at hypervigilance, out the wazoo, completely, my mind wasn't working. So I was like so far down the rabbit hole. And so I come in, I'm sitting in on the couch, and she's asking me to go through what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
And the door slams to the front of her office, and I'm like a cat, and I'm on the ceiling, like with claws out, grips. I lost it. And at this point, I mean, you have this, you still put up this facade even around your family, because there's this expectation. Well, Sam's a Secret Service agent, she knows how to get through things. She can solve problems, and I didn't want people to know that this was not working. Like, I couldn't solve the simplest of problems. And so I was terrified. I mean, just the tears started flowing, and everything that she did from that moment to not only bring me back to the present,
Mm-hmm.
but calm me down. So my heart rate would come down. I stopped sweating, I stopped crying, and I could speak again, but from a place of having it be like a relief. Like, I knew, like, that. Here's I gotta get in the screen. that she immediately understood. And that's where her, tons of years of experience in EMDR. I wasn't the first case on the couch.
You weren't
I
the test case.
actually had a love seat, not a couch.
Here's my question, and this is why I don't think EMDR was so effective with me.
Sure.
Was, Sam, you said, okay, you went in there for the 9/11 incident, the trauma that affected you with 9/11. Myself, I had 30 years of built up trauma, so I had multiple traumas within me. Like with Jeff identified 19 different traumas that he was able to release work through in EMDR. My therapist at the point, when I walked in, it was kind of like, all right, so tell me how you feel. And, as a first responder, I was like, where do I start?
Right.
Where do I go? And, it was the very first session, and she wanted me to start talking about traumas. And I'm like, well, where do I don't know where to grab? And I think that doing that, my body shut down. And that's why I think it's so important. Like what you were saying, Monica, is that you have to get to know your therapist. Your therapist has to get to know you and start to work, and they have to lead you into the traumas, because as a first responder, you don't know where to go.
Plus, you have spent many years, like John, I think you're a perfect example. You spent many years stuffing that stuff down, stuffing that, what your sign says, down.
Right.
I can't open the Pandora's box, because if I open that box, it's going to spray everywhere, and I'm not going to know how to get all that back in.
Right.
And so, a good clinician is going to help you identify those things that are priorities and how we work on them after some rapport is built, after you have some tools, after you know that if I open the door a crack, it's not going to explode everywhere. And if it does explode, like your experience, Sam, if it does explode, if something triggers me, how are we going to put this back together? How are we going to make this so I can still be a parent, so I can still be a partner, so I can still be a productive member of society? How are we going to do that? You need to learn those things before we start just unpacking stuff.
Right. So as a first responder, and especially a retired officer, when we talk about retired, because there's no transition support, a retired officer coming into an EMDR session or a session with a licensed clinician, how would they approach all the 20 or 30 or even 40 years sometimes of all those multiple traumas? How do they start piecing them together and picking and choosing, or which one bothers them? How do they do that? So
clinicians have different styles around that. And I would tell you there's a couple of ways that folks typically will approach someone with long-term complex trauma, painful life experiences over a long amount of time. So we might talk about what's currently eating your lunch. What is the thing how is this showing up in your life right now? Well, this is my sixth wife. I'm currently using alcohol and drugs on the regular. last week I tore the door off the hinges, whatever it is. So we might talk about how is that currently showing up and what experience is that related to. So we might work on some present stuff. We might also work on, is there one particular event that you really feel like represents all the BS that you've dealt with in the last 30 years? So that might be one event that you just can't get out of your mind. Or when we talk about, you mentioned, I think it was the other John that had 19 things that they were working through.
Jeff.
So Jeff, okay. So let's talk through your top 10. What are your top 10? And we'll identify out of that one which we wanna start with. Sometimes if I have someone who has a long history of complex trauma or a lot of painful life experiences, we might start with kind of a test case, something that isn't the huge trauma. We might start with something smaller so that they can start to trust me, trust the process, and we can go from there. And then after we resolve that trauma, let's move on to the next one, or let's move on to the big mamma jamma one that you really want to work on now that you know what the process looks like. And again, a good clinician is going to sit with you and work with you through that, not just say, here we go, this is what we're going to do because I know best.
Right, exactly. So we just identified one of the disadvantages is having a clinician that wants to unpack the suitcase all at once.
Yeah.
And so let's continue with this. Like, what are some other disadvantages, that you've seen from first responders that have shared with you? Hey, this is what happened. I don't ever want to do this again.
Yeah. When we explain EMDR, well, one of the things is a lot of times folks feel like EMDR needs to be explained because it looks different than traditional therapy. So when I'm telling you we're going to use some bilateral stimulation and that all sounds like a bunch of therapeutic mumbo jumbo and some kind of hoodoo voodoo. So sometimes people are put off by that right away. What's interesting when we have talked about this in the clinical circle, I don't explain what I'm doing when I'm doing trauma-focused CBT, which is a talk therapy. Yes, I know all the stuff that I'm doing, but because it looks like traditional talk therapy in a lot of ways, I don't necessarily feel like I need to explain it. So some of that is a disservice on that we as clinicians who practice EMDR probably need to work on a little bit. This is just like any other treatment modality. So that's a disadvantage that sometimes people don't have familiarity with it. So they think it's kind of hoodoo voodoo. I think another disadvantage is that we don't talk about it as a therapeutic modality that is accessible, that is efficient, that is just as is as effective and more effective than a lot of other treatment modalities we have, because we don't talk about therapy in general. And so people don't know about different types of therapy. So if someone comes to me and they say like, oh, I've been in counselor, well, what kind of I've been in counseling. Well, what kind of counseling? Most people don't even know because they haven't talked to their counselor about what kind of counseling do you provide. I just go in their office and I sit on the couch and talk about my feelings.
Right. They look in a phone book. They go, oh, there's a counselor near me. It could be a family counselor, or it could be anything, an addiction counselor, but not a trauma specialist counselor. Yes.
And I think that brings another advantage, another disadvantage, or that people need to be mindful of when they're choosing a therapist. Anybody who graduates from therapy school can practice trauma therapy. That does not mean that they are qualified to practice trauma therapy, right? Anybody who graduates from counseling school can practice lots of different types of counseling. That doesn't mean they have any experience or expertise. And some of these advanced treatment methodologies are cost prohibitive for therapists to engage in because sometimes they are expensive to learn this super specialized trauma treatment. And so sometimes it's hard to find clinicians in your community who practice this because it is specialized and it's expensive to get trained in it sometimes. I will tell you that is one of the benefits of this new virtual world. Now I can treat any client in Texas, the state that I'm licensed in, anywhere in Texas. So they don't have to live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and try to get to my office on a Tuesday night after a long shift. This is one of the accessibility things that has actually been improved because we have learned to embrace the virtual world. But that was a problem before. People couldn't find trained EMDR clinicians in their communities.
So I want to touch on something that you just said with the fact that, a lot of things have gone virtual. how, when you say that EMDR is still effective even in the virtual world, explain that a little bit more. I mean, mine was traditional and had the light bar and everything in office. What does it afford besides not having to try and get to the office? How is it advantageous to do it virtually?
So I'll tell you a couple of things. So the research is currently being done. Of course, we're in the middle of this. So we will have some numbers at some point to I hope be able to give us some clearer understanding of that. I'll tell you from my experience how it's shifted some of the work with my clients. So like you said, getting there, that's a thing. A couple of other things that I feel like have been really positive for my clients in being able to do this therapy without having to come to a different place is they don't have to see anybody in the lobby. So that's also a thing. There's a safety concern about you were talking about officers feeling like they are targeted in a lot of ways. There might be some safety concerns. An officer walks into an office, they don't know anybody there. So they're in the comfort of their own home or another place where they already feel comfortable and safe. They're not having to deal with any of of coming to a place that they don't know or feel some sense of security in. Also, because people are sometimes doing this in their home or another place that they're comfortable, they can transition very quickly. They don't have to get in traffic. They don't have to deal with a bunch of other stuff. They can go and take a hot shower right away, or they can, go out for a run right away without having to deal with all the encumbrance of driving somewhere, dealing with that. And also, I feel like the clients that I've worked with have expressed that for some of them that they're unpacking a lot of trauma. Sometimes the intensity level can be really high. If I'm sitting here in this room with you and we're talking about all your stuff and you don't know me very well, for whatever reason, for some of those clients who have that difficulty, having this virtual lens to look through gives them a sense of security that they don't feel as vulnerable as they could if they were. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And the vulnerability thing is key because as we've talked to a number of clinicians and first responders that have been on the show, is that vulnerability piece is key because you have to almost walk into therapy being very open and agreeing to be vulnerable. And it's phenomenal. I mean, gosh darn it, John, if anything good has come out of this COVID crap virtual world that we've gotten used to, that sounds really exciting. And, now it's like, hey, first responders, you're in the no excuse zone. You're in the no excuse zone. You're at home. You're doing this. You go for a run after. You're not having to deal with bleep holes in the traffic that you want to drag out of the car.
Right. But this goes back to what Monica was saying before, and you were saying where any first responder that thinks about therapy's bad. Right?
Sure.
They're conditioned. We really have to start.
Or what's wrong with me?
Right.
There's something wrong with me if I need therapy. Maybe not.
You're not allowed to be. You're not allowed to be broken, as you said. You're not allowed to be broken. So, and that's what happens when we go through the academy, and we're built up with this resilience, saying, "Hey, we got this big red S on our chest. Nothing could hurt us."
Yeah.
And then we have the things where. Say it's just a car accident where we have, somebody who's perished in a car accident and your partner turns around and says, blows it off, but it really affected you, because some traumas will affect some people and not affect others, or they just may not be showing it. So a lot of young officers go, well, you know what? I gotta build up myself to say, they're not letting themselves feel the trauma. As it happens.
Absolutely. And you tickled two things for me in that. One is that all trauma is a nervous system response. That's all it is. It's not a mental health condition. It is a nervous system response. Your brain and body have reacted to an overwhelming experience. And it may be, like you're saying, John, this may be the 47th fatal car accident you've seen, but for whatever reason, this one hit you different.
Right.
You know, it's just an overwhelming response, or it may be your very first one and you're a young person and you see your senior officer who's like, it's fine. You're going to see a lot of those things and they're really having a reaction to it. And culturally, they're not able to express that. So our brain knows how to heal. Just like if I cut my hand, I don't need to say like, hey, white blood cells, come and do your thing. You know, I don't need to do that.
Right.
Your brain knows how to heal already, but because of overwhelming circumstances or maybe some of this cultural issue that says, don't attend to that, don't even look at it. So imagine if I cut my hand and I've got a splinter sticking in it and someone says, don't look at it, don't attend to it, don't do anything, just ignore it. Yeah, oh, sure. That shit ain't gonna heal, right?
Right.
Because it's got that splinter in it. And so the splinter is that trauma that if we can remove that trauma using a tool like EMDR, if we can remove that splinter so it's not festering, so it's not infected, so it's not causing other disabilities to happen. I can't use my hand now because it's swollen. If we can remove that piece through the EMDR processing or any trauma treatment that's effective, then the body will continue to do what it knows to do, and that's heal.
Right.
Yeah. So if we can look at it as a nervous system response, people get that a little bit better.
How important is decompression for our officers? So
Sure.
when we talk about the car accident, right? So you go from a car accident to a domestic dispute to a child drowning to a gunshot to a robbery, all in an 8-hour period. You know, like Sam, when we were talking to Chris Fields from Oklahoma, he was a firefighter in the Oklahoma City bombing, and he spent 11 hours pulling people out of the rubble. He goes back to his firehouse. They release him. There's no decompression. And at 2 o'clock, they bang out with a house fire like it's a normal day.
Right.
Our officers aren't getting any decompression time to the point where they can process these traumas in a healing fashion throughout their tours.
So I say this sentence frequently, especially with first responders and other people like therapists too. Like, resilience is compromised when there is no respite. And so you can have the most fantastic self-care practices and be the most resilient person ever. And if you're not getting respite from that, if there is no time to decompress, to address the impact of that, you are going to fail. Your trauma exposure response is real, and we're just setting people up for failure, setting them up for the lack of health, for illness, for other impacts that are associated with being exposed to trauma all the time. So anything that you do, even if you think about it from, I work in a factory and I press the same button over and over and over again, I'm going to eventually have some kind of response from that, right? I'm going to get carpal tunnel because there's just, there's wear and tear. And that's pressing a button. We're asking you guys to be exposed to extremely traumatic experiences that are varied. So it's not the same. It's not just repetitive action. It's repetitive action. And then there's some uncertainty around it, which causes an additional level of stress and strain because you don't know what you're walking into the next time.
Right. I want to ask a question because as I'm writing this article for the Police Blues magazine, what you just said, resilience is compromised when there is no respite. I put that in the comment stream because that's huge. I actually cited an article that goes back to 2012 with a version of what you just said. So because this is not new, okay, and I'm sure it goes back before 2012.
Sure.
Why are we still in the same place?
That's the $1 million question. Yeah. That's the $1 million question.
If we can answer that, we'll cure everything.
I can make something up.
That's what we're trying to do, right? It takes more than a village.
Yeah. One of the things I know, John, I had the good fortune of talking to Sam when we were setting this up. And one of the things that I said that I feel like you guys and Officer Todd, Jerry, and Garland, I feel like the thing that is shifting the tide for your community in particular Taylor, is that it's coming from you. Here I am, Monica, I'm Susie, social worker. I don't know shit about your culture, unless I really make a concerted effort to be a part of your culture and to learn about it. You guys know the culture. And I think people like you are shifting the tide and will continue to shift the tide, because you're not, again, Susie, social worker, feelies, and, all that stuff. You guys are the ones that are able to come in and say, this is my lived experience. This is what I did, and it saved my life. This is my lived experience. This is what I did, and it saved my family. This is what I did. It's my lived experience. I worked on it, and it made me a better person in my community. This is what I did, and it kept me in the force longer, healthier, better. If you guys are the ones that are preaching officer resilience and first responder resilience, that I think is golden.
Well, thank you for that. It's definitely it's something that is an ongoing mission that gets us out of bed, even bleary-eyed, day after day, because we know the mission is huge and it's going to go on past us, and we anything that we can do to let the first responders know that they're not alone, that we've been there, and kind of, hey, here's a landmine, so you need to step to the right, or here's this, you need to step to the left, so they don't fall in. It really is. But with that, having support from practitioners like yourself, because we're one piece of it.
Sure.
Be able to, and I think it's fair to say that we are, a badge of honor are fans of, going outside of your agency.
Yeah.
At all costs, because it's all about you as the first responder getting the best help for you,
right,
and not, my mom used to say, you don't shit where you eat. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, my mom does. So, and it's leaving that, it's leaving your office out of it. Like it is trauma because of the work that we do, and because of the office and the things that we see and the things that might not go great, or the supervisors that we have, they're suffering and going through stuff that sometimes we don't understand, and maybe we end up being the supervisor and we go, oh, that's why Joey, it was the way he was. Now I get it, because I just did the same thing and that didn't feel great.
But you bring up a great point, Sam. You bring up a great point with that, and we discussed this, where getting out of your office and getting out of the uniform and getting into your comfort zone. We've talked to Todd and we've talked to other peer support officers, and they're like, well, nobody's coming into my office.
Right.
Well, you're right next to the chief's office.
Right.
You have a mental health sign on your door. Nobody wants to be stigmatized in that fashion. They don't want their peers to see that they are broken. They don't want their peers to see. So getting out of the precinct, getting out of the firehouse, getting out of the ambulance, getting into a pair of sweatpants and being comfortable without a badge and a belt on to go to talk to somebody kind of gives you more of that vulnerability. Kind of makes you feel more comfortable.
It humanizes. It humanizes us. So that our therapist is like, working with another human, not somebody that may come in with a shield if they're wearing a uniform. Along the lines of that, I mean, the years that I've spoken at different conferences and stuff, that is the one thing that the first responders, when we have the conversations, is like, I just took it out of agency. I just needed to get my shit together. I needed to do it in my own way. And, this goes a couple years back, and where most departments that were at these conferences didn't have a formal program yet either.
Sure.
So now we're seeing, departments that have, hey, if you need to talk to somebody, here's a list or whatever, and all you do is look at it and keep walking, or jot down a number, get on your computer. You can still do things privately. And what I think is great is that the clinicians like yourself, Monica, you do understand what we deal with because you have a number of first responders of your years of experience, debriefing us, bringing us down, utilizing EMDR, and that you have gone above and beyond. I met you through Tajiri, Garland PD, God bless those folks, because they take, our mental wellness very seriously, our brain health very seriously. But you go above and beyond, offering special discounts to our first responder community. So from John and I, we want to say thank you.
Of course.
How would a first responder go about, seeking you out?
Absolutely. You can just Google my name, Monica Urbaniak. I have a website. It's urbaniakwellness.com. It's my last name. Sam and I were joking about all the weird pronunciations I get. So it's
that's why I'm so glad she didn't ask me to introduce you. I was looking at your last name, and I'm so bad with names. I mean, I could screw up Smith. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to pronounce that last name.
Yes. So it's Urban, then IAK.
Right. That's how I got it.
Yes, exactly. So you can say it Urbaniak, the Maniac, whatever you need to say. So you can find me that way. I'm on Psychology Today. I have a website. My email address is monica@urbaniakwellness.com. And Sam has all my contact information. She can pop into the chat.
Put that up on our website.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I know a number of other clinicians who care about our first responders and who want to provide support. So, we talk amongst ourselves about, does anybody have room for a first responder on a sliding scale? Who can see this person? They're out in your neck of the woods and they want to come in person. And so, yeah, please feel free to connect with me. Also, what we were talking about earlier, I may not be the right fit. Someone may not like my style. I don't know why they wouldn't, but maybe they don't. And then I can refer them to someone who's a better fit. You do the same thing when you're finding a person who's going to fix your plumbing. This guy, I didn't feel, he felt shysty and I felt like he was overcharging me. So I went with someone else. Why wouldn't you do that with your brain health?
Right.
Let
me ask you a question. When you say brain health, and me and Sam have talked about this a lot too, and we're working on this. Do you, like with peer support groups?
Yes.
That are in departments, and a lot of peer support groups are like, oh wow, you could talk to somebody. You got a good. We're going to put you on a peer support. Do you think there should be a national standard of training or a level of standard, like how OSHA has a bare minimum standard on safety, right? Yeah. We do not have a bare minimum standard on mental health within our nation's law enforcement. What's your stand on that?
I 100% think that peer support can be fantastic and I think is a necessary component for a lot of situations. But I do 100%, the opinion of Monica Urbaniak is that there needs to be some kind of training, bare minimum of training. You think about most jobs that you do, you have to have some onboarding, some training.
Right. But do you think it should be because each department,
does it differently?
Does it differently. Do you think there should be a national standard of care that's my opinion, because I've seen so many different approaches to mental health, and they were like, well, I took a 2-hour webinar, or I did a test for an hour on. Yeah. We should be treating each officer the same. Pretty much. I think there needs to be some bare minimum standards for sure. And some communities need different things than others do. So I understand that piece as well. But I am a fan of everyone getting access to the best amount of training that they can at a price that's affordable to them in a way that's accessible to them so that they can do a good job. So I totally agree with that piece of it. Yes, every community is going to need something's a little bit different. Your urban police department versus your rural, super rural, where you're a county and you're covering, or you're in some area and you're covering a variety of counties. So yeah, absolutely. I also like the idea of cross agency training and cross agency accessibility, so that like this law enforcement officer may be getting the support that they need from our community, but maybe they need to
Sorry, that was Amazon delivery. I didn't have dogs. I've got Amazon. Sorry. Yeah. So I also like that community collaboration. Like, John, in my police department, this is what is working really great. What do you think about that? The collaboration will help us also increase the effectiveness and the efficiency and the creativity with which we're addressing the different experiences that our law enforcement officers are having. So that collaboration, I think, is imperative.
For sure. Yeah, and Carrie commented, we would go out to breakfast together and rehash after a 12-hour night shift because they didn't have the resources. Yeah. And hey, get to talking. That's my biggest thing for creating a safety net for yourself is you cannot shove it down.
Right.
So God bless you, Carrie, and the guys that you went out to breakfast with, for sure.
Well, see that Carrie brings up a good point. They went out to breakfast and they were able to discuss certain things. When we talk about the peer support networks getting together and the training that they need, it, Sam, and I'm sure Monica, you're aware of it. The training budget's always the first to get cut. The mental health budget is always reallocated because, hey, we need a Chiefs conference. Yeah.
More bullets.
Or we need more bullets. Right. So, there's never enough funding for those things. So, and you know how cheap cops are. Cops aren't pulling shit out of their own pocket, Well,
Todd and I were talking this weekend about safety equipment, a piece of safety equipment is officer resiliency training. A piece of safety equipment for you to be able to effectively and safely do your job is to have your mental wellness checked on. Is to have your brain health attended to. Yeah, we have a gym at the police department. I promise you we have a gym at the police department because we need you to be physically fit. Well, we also need you to be mentally fit.
Yeah. Right. But when you talk about equipment, you're thinking, the dash cams, the body cams, the body armor. You don't think that this is a piece of vital equipment that needs to perform optimally day after day.
Well, cops go for physicals every year or every 2 years, right? But they never do a mental health. Once you pass your mental health exam, take the psych exam to get on a job, they never reevaluate your mental health again. Yeah. Even pilots go 2-3 times a year because they have all those people that they're accountable for. Think about a police officer that has all these people that they're accountable for, and we do not really check on their mental health as much as we should. Right.
Well, we talk about professional athletes a lot too, and that's sometimes a good way that people who work in your line of business can connect to, like wear and tear when you're a professional athlete on your body. Your career is pretty short because the wear and tear on your body is exceptionally exacerbated, right? The wear and tear on y'all's brains is that way too. On my brain as a therapist, on y'all's brain, because you're being exposed to that trauma, repetitive trauma on your body when you're an NFL player. We understand that, and we attend to that. We're like, oh man, he's got busted knees from all those years doing that work. Well, he's also got a busted spirit from all of those years of doing that really hard work, you guys. So I think that's an important thing for us to identify.
Well, mental health is an invisible injury.
Right.
So if it's not there, it doesn't exist. If we can't see it, it doesn't exist. And like Sam, you talked to Ben last week, my therapist at Chateau, and how we talked about him going as a therapist. He has to go for resilience. He sits in a big room with other therapists and they take care of their own mental health.
Absolutely.
But when we don't see it as, if I broke my arm, man, they'd send me to rehab. They do everything they can to fix it and get me back on a job. Yep. If I have a mental breakdown, they're just gonna be like, when you're coming back, they're not gonna do anything.
Yeah, you'd have physical therapy, you'd have all the thing, you'd be on light duty, all of that. Right. Well, and and I love that you said it's an invisible illness until it's not. Right. Because when it's not is when something terrible happens, and then at that point.
Goes flying across the squad room, or you're starting to have car wrecks, or you're starting to have the increase in complaints, or so it does. It's like Jeff Freeman says, it does. It does get visible eventually. Like, dude, why are you pissed off all the time?
Right.
Well, that's the flags. That's the flags, and you bring it up, Sam. you know what? Why are you pissed off all the time? Or you're missing work, or you're late for work, or you threw the radio across. They go, oh, he's just having a bad day. But no one takes the time to go, hey, bro, you okay?
Why? Yeah, why?
Why did you do that? Why?
Yeah.
You know, no one asks the questions. We missed we missed the signs. We're not trained in evaluating why this officer is feeling this way. He was a great officer, like Jeff, great officer. Then all of a sudden started to slip. But they just said, oh, he's just burnt out. He's just burnt out.
Yeah.
No, he's dealing with traumas in his own way.
Or he's having family problems because of his traumatization.
Right.
And so that gives us a reason to be like, oh, he's just having trouble with his partner at home. He's having some trouble. He's drinking a little too much, or, he's dating someone he shouldn't.
Yeah. We have to stop kind of sweeping it under the rug and making excuses and having, like, Carrie go out to breakfast, like, hey, what's up? Asking, are you okay? Just again, it's down to get to talking. And I just, again, Monica, you have shined a light on so much tonight, and the need for so much more that is needed. I'm glad we talked about that national standard. And again, so for folks that want to reach out to you, it's urbaniakwellness.com. That's the easiest. Yep. Okay. We're also going to put this. I'm going to put this in the show notes when everything gets published and uploaded tomorrow. And so folks will be able to see that. They go watch live the replay. It'll be up in the notes here.
Right.
Any final closing thoughts there to our first responders out there?
Well, I just 100% want to express my gratitude for all that our first responders do to keep us safe, to keep us healthy, to care for our communities in ways that are oftentimes very hidden and private. We just take it for granted. And I know that none of you are doing it for the fame or the money. So I just want to express my extreme gratitude to all of the first responders for all that they do for us every day. And to you, John and Sam, for everything that you guys are doing to care for that community. I think that's really remarkable. And you guys are heroes for that.
Well, we're all a team. I mean, we're all a team together. And, the more voices we have involved in this to raise awareness, the better the officers and our first responders will be.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for
being
with us tonight. Really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Take care, Monica.
Bye.
Great.
So wow, that was incredible. So many. I even did some notes here. It's gonna go back and we'll exchange emails tomorrow. But we talked about some really, really important stuff, and there are so many important things going on out there. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to some of the banners and stuff that that we made up. What Monica said was key, talking about resilience, talking about really diving into the meat of trauma, how to be more resilient, tools that you can use. And, here at A Badge of Honor, that's what we are all about. On Friday, April 23rd, we are having another First Responders Healing Our Heroes workshop. And it will be either in Rowlett or Garland. We will have all the details on abadgeofhonor.com, because thank you, Governor Abbott, for lifting for opening Texas. So we might be able to move to a larger venue and accommodate more first responders. So we will get that out. But save the date, Friday, April 23rd, 0800 to 1600 hours. You want to get a ticket, you want to have a seat there because it's going to be an incredible day. Breakfast and lunch is always taken care of for everybody that is there. Our partners that we work with will be there as well, talking about how they can support you as a first responder. And speaking of support, John, we've got this thing called Facebook and YouTube.
Yes.
So if you're watching on Facebook, jump over to the YouTube.
Yes, because we need subscribers.
Mad Radio Texas. So spell it out. Mad Radio Texas. Hit subscribe, because the more subscribers we get, we got to hit 200 to be able to do some really awesome things on the YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, jump on over to the Facebook.
Facebook?
The Facebook. With an Italian flair. The Facebook. And you can catch us on, just go to Facebook and type in the search, Mad Radio, and you can find our page there. You can also search A Badge of Honor. You can find us there because the show is live streamed to all those 3 channels. And if you want to support what we do, because it's not free, just saying, go to abadgeofhonor.com, click on Mad Radio. You can have a donate button right there. Every penny, I swear every penny counts and goes to supporting first responders and the ability to keep doing this awesome show and bringing on guests like Monica.
Yes.
That we just had. And you can also, on our Facebook, a way to support, after the show is over, you can go back to the Facebook page. You scroll up to the top, and we've got all the books up there from past guests. Show your love to them. And I don't know, there's like an important legislative session coming up next week or the week after next, I think the 15th. And, we're talking about things like constitutional carry and license to carry. And why I'm talking about this and why it's important is because I have been told repeatedly that the most unique way to support this show is to get your Texas license to carry. I just, I've been told.
You've been told?
I've been told numerous times. So if you want to get your Texas license to carry, go to carryintexas.com. You'll see my face, short video, tell you how to go about doing that. And you support the show. So it's cool all around.
Yes.
What else, John?
Oh, that's it. Kerry Booth is just asking, what's the YouTube? I don't know if you answered it already. It's YouTube Texas.
Yeah, the YouTube. Go on. I'll put it in the notes right here. Go ahead, talk.
Yeah. Once again, I want to thank our first responder network that's out there. Please share this with friends and family, as you don't know who you're helping by just hitting that share button. We can't help everybody, but we can help one person at a time. And the topics that we bring forward every week are very important. They're vetted topics. But we always remind you to do your own due diligence when picking a therapist or picking a program that fits you, that's right for you. So we are also available to help you do those vetting processes, to give you certain recommendations to certain areas where you may need help. And we are always here for you.
You are not alone.
You are not alone. All right, Sam. Well, once again, great show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will be back next week from 7 to 8.
Another exciting show coming up. We're actually going to dive next week into EAP and a successful EAP program that is working.
Excellent.
So until next week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.